Okay, this is the last chapter of our book. I've really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys have too. The Spirit of the Whale of Barrow. I'd like to learn a little bit more what happened with Uncle Jack, but maybe we won't. I don't know. Little Owl pushed back her hood to watch the baleen as it was carried triumphantly across the sagging ice to Captain Vincent Oligoc's sled. The long, graceful filters pranced and tossed like ponies. They meant timeless pleasures to Little Owl, baskets she would weave with Annie, legends to be carved in the springy blue-black blades, and jewelry to be fashioned from the glistening black stalks with their ivory white bases. The artwork would be beautiful. This baleen was extraordinarily rich in color and shine. The snow had almost stopped falling, the sky had brightened, and the eider ducks and gulls who had been sleeping on the ice awoke and called to each other. The guillemots stretched their legs and wings, preparing to fly on. There are not many different kinds of birds in the Arctic, but there are many of each kind. Billions freckled the sea ice in spring. Not far from the birds, the seals yawned. It was wake-up time, not by the light signals, but by internal clocks. The wild things had had enough sleep. They would fly or swim on, eating and napping when they needed to. At noon and midnight, they would take longer sleeps. When the moktuk and whale meat had been divided, only the ribs and the skull remained. Every other part in peace had an owner, even the heart, the liver, and the stomach. The whalers would share their portions of the whale with relatives and friends, who would in turn share it with relatives and friends, and many Eskimos would share with their Tanaks. Some owners would freeze their portions in their ice cellars, rooms dug deep in the frozen Arctic soil that remains at 18 degrees Fahrenheit the year round. Others would store their gift in their electric freezers. As the birds woke up, the women began to gather around the arches of ribs that stood dark, red, and majestic against the white snow. The gleaning time was at hand. Cusick, the harpooner, had raised his whale knife. When he dropped it, the women and anyone else, Tannak or Eskimo, could rush in and carve off the last scraps of meat. Little Owl did not like this part of the ceremony. She found it demeaning to the whale. The people fought like gulls over the tidbits. The civilized system of distribution that had been worked out so carefully over the centuries broke down at gleaning time, and fights erupted. But she was not the one to change tradition. She sighed over what was to come and watched Cusick. He held his long knife high as he watched the last pieces of baleen bob down the blue and dawn pink ice valley to safety. 40 people carried the 600 filters, which were anywhere from 5 to 10 feet long. The last ones formed an arch of triumph on the ice. I see the spirit of Ogvik going through that arch as he returns to the sea, Little Owl said aloud to no one, but Lincoln was listening. So do I, he said. Wow, butchering pigs at the Dutchess County Fair was never like this. What is the Dutchess County Fair? Little Owl asked. When you come to Harvard, I'll take you to it, but you'll be disappointed. Lincoln, Little Owl said as she waited for the gleaning, did you ever find out why muskox disappeared into Barrow? Sort of, he said, startled by her question. Then with a chuckle, he realized that the people of the ice knew a great deal about him. I think, he said, glad to discuss the mystery, that he changed his mind about Eskimo whaling. He was embarrassed to tell me. That's hardly a reason, Little Owl said, putting on her dark glasses as the sun brightened and burned off the last threads of the snow cloud. Well, how about this? Lincoln decided to test another theory he had evolved. Bertha told me that muskox and Vincent Oligoc had a terrible argument. That might have upset him. It would me. Not that. It was a good argument. Vincent convinced muskox that the Eskimo must whale for our culture to survive. He told him there were not now enough bowheads for the Eskimo to harvest a few. He said the Eskimo would never kill off the great whale as the white man had done. The Eskimo would not push it to extinction. After that, muskox joined the science research team. Well, then why? Lincoln asked. He just came up here and vanished as far as my family is concerned. He rubbed his chin. Do you know why? He got married. Oh, Lincoln thought a moment. What's that got to do with anything? He could have told me that. I'd understand that. Little Owl pushed her sunglasses up on her forehead and looked at him with surprise. He thought you knew. How could I know if he didn't write and tell me? He told your mother, Annie said. He did? She never told me. Lincoln stood somberly as he let this sink in. Why wouldn't she tell me? Little Owl shuffled her feet and replaced her glasses. Possibly, she said, because he married an Eskimo, my cousin Lottie. Lincoln felt as if he'd been hit by a snowball. Images tumbled around in his head. He saw great-great-grandmother Nora, the Arctic, the paintings on the wall of his home. He saw Tiglook in the empty bullet chamber of his own gun. He saw Roy's hands around his throat. He saw the anger in the drunk man's eyes when he spotted Uncle Jack's blond beard, and the change on his face when he saw that he was his brother in spirit, married as he was to an Eskimo. His thoughts kept turning, and up came his mother's face. She had a piece of tape over her mouth. She could not talk to Lincoln. She could not tell him that Nora was an Inupiat, or that his beloved Uncle Jack had married an Eskimo. And apparently his father had not wanted to upset her, so he had not told him either. Lincoln felt very sorry for them. My family needs a whale, he said softly. They really do. Cusick lowered his whaling knife. The women ran, elbowing their way to the enormous ribs. They cut and slashed with their ulus and filled plastic bags with the good meat. A few stole full bags when the gleaners were not looking. I thought all fighting stopped when a whale was taken, Lincoln said as he watched the scene. This is a mess. This is ancient, little Al said glumly. We are back to the beginning, before the earth turned over and the wolves were the people. Then she brightened. But this passes just as the darkness did when the world turned over. Tonight you will find love and friendship at the feast at Annie Golagok's house, although the family mourns. She knocked the snow off her ruff. Even your mother would be welcome. They smiled at each other, but not without pain. Tiglook and Roy had taken off their parkas during the hot work of butchering. They were now talking earnestly in their T-shirts, even though the temperature was only a few degrees above zero. Presently, they came to some agreement and searched the faces of the crowd, spotted little Al and Lincoln, and smiling broadly, joined them. What's up? Lincoln asked. We have something for you, Lincoln Noah, Tiglook said. He took from his pocket a smooth piece of ivory as big as his fist. It was creamy white, shaped like a gently curved hand and very shiny. He put it in Lincoln's hand. This is for you, he said. What is it? Lincoln asked. It's really beautiful. A bone that lies in the ear of the whale. It balances him and helps him hear the sounds in the sea. And, added Roy, it brings the vibrations from the people to him. He knows to whom to give himself. Lincoln gently turned the rare object over. This instrument heard you, Tiglook said. We thought you ought to have it. Thank you. He was unable to say more. Off the ice, Major King called. The women stopped gleaning and looked in fright at the mayor, who had more or less taken over the captain's role. His words were to be taken seriously. They rounded up their children, stuffed their plastic bags of precious meat into their gunny sacks, grabbed the big rib bones, and hurried toward the grounded ice. The Golagok kitchen was hauled to a sled. The tent went down and was packed on top of the kitchen. There was no time to load the skins. Everyone was running to get off the booming, moving ice that was sagging under the weight of the last great bone, the skull. Muskox caught up with the mayor, and together they escorted dawdling gleaners and children through the ice pass to the dividing area. Little Owl reached the valley and stopped. What's the matter? Lincoln asked. We can't leave yet. She glanced at the mayor. He was herding two little children, his back to her. Lincoln Noah, she said, the spirit of the whale has not been set free. She turned and ran toward the whale, and Lincoln followed her. Off the ice! Major Kingick happened to turn around and see little Al and Lincoln running to the whale. Chuck Riley, he shouted. Sir, came a reply from nearby. Get Tom Albert on your radio. Tell him to get out here on the double. Little Al, Lincoln yelled as they ran. Come back, the ice is going out. He ran faster, reached for her parka, missed, and found himself 2 inches of slush beside the great skull of the Agvik. It stood 8 feet high and was 20 feet long. The bowhead is almost half head. A magnificent sight alone on the ice that seemed to hold it dear and claim it. The mayor and Muskox untied the umiak and ran with it to the water. Little Al threw her weight against the skull. It did not budge. Help me, Lincoln. We must push this Sonique into the sea. Lincoln did not stop to think. Little Al needed him. He ran back a dozen steps, sprinted, and threw his weight against the great bone. The ice tipped and slowly slid the skull toward the water. I bless the great spirit of Nukik, Little Al said. Return to your people, Agvik. Enter into them and become a new whale. Amen. Goodbye. The bone slid faster and faster. The ice tilted more steeply and dumped all three into the sea. The raucous blattering of a helicopter sounded overhead as Lincoln scrambled up onto the ice floe where the whale had once lain. His boots and mittens had filled with water, but his body was still dry inside the mass of clothing. Little Al! Here, he turned around. She was stretched out on her belly on the whale floe, looking up at him with an apologetic smile on her face. He pulled her into the center of the tippy floe, and they sat, feet out straight, looking at each other. And there in the sky was a helicopter, on the water, an umiak. Lincoln waved to the skybird as the chill began to reach him. Little Al cried, Atata, and broke into tears. Ware was alone, kneeling in the center of the boat, paddling calmly toward her. This was his sea, her sea. All was well. The wind from the helicopter blades whipped up the water and beat against Lincoln's already cold face, making it colder. The mechanical bird hovered and slowly descended. A rope ladder was pushed out the open door. It fell into Lincoln's hands. He grabbed it and held it steady for Little Al. Take hold, he yelled over the copter roar. The new isn't bad at all. Little Al shook her head. Come with me, Lincoln, she said as Ware silently placed the umiak beside the floe. Come back to your people with me. She tugged his feet, his wet, freezing snow shirt. No, Little Al, no, that's crazy. Don't go in the umiak. The copter's warm. It's good. It has everything you need. Dry clothing, food, medicine. Instantly he saw his words were not the right ones. They brought pain to Little Al's face. She pulled away from him. And she spoke a long phrase there in their language. And Little Al, it's got a star by it, which means I should be able to, okay, there it is. It is a real hardship when we have nothing to give, is what she's saying. Little Al said. She steadied herself on Ware's extended paddle and stepped into the umiak. Little Al, please, speak English, please. Why are you closing me out? Lincoln, the loudspeaker blasted. Tom Albert here, chief of the Sea Rescue Squad. Get yourself up that ladder. Little Al, come with me, Lincoln called. Get yourself up here, roared Tom Albert. Little Owl pulled a fur over her. Lincoln stepped on the rope ladder and climbed halfway. Then some mechanism took hold and he was pulled swinging and twisting into the warm body of the helicopter. A rescue volunteer pulled off Lincoln's ice-crusted boots, pants, and parka and threw a blanket around him as he leaned over the observation bubble and looked down on Ware and Little Owl. And there's Ware and Little Owl in the Umiak. So they got pushed out on the ice and they went in two different directions. He went up in the helicopter and she got in the Umiak with her grandfather. They were all alone on the Arctic Ocean, the last Eskimos on Earth going their way in harmony with the world. Major Kingick, this is Tom Albert. Do you copy? I copy you, Albert. Over. We've effected a rescue. We have Lincoln. Ware Almagog has effected a rescue too. He has Little Owl. Both kids are in good shape. Over. Hallelujah, said Major Kingick. Come on home. That's lots of Maktik. Over. That sunny night, Lincoln searched for Little Owl in the happy singing crowd that had gathered around Annie Oligok's house. He had to know why she had closed him out. Was it revealed in her Inupiat words? He thought so. She was not at the stove with Annie or even outside with the kids who were doing the 1-foot high kick. Tigluck said she had suffered no ill effects from her dunking because Ware had his survival gear with him. Tigluck thought she was with Bertha and Vincent Oligok's children and grandchildren, joining them in their grief. She was not at their house, although she had been there, according to Major Kingick. Utic said he had just recently seen her dancing with Cusick outside the community center. Lincoln hurried off to find her and make amends. As he was leaping around and over the mud puddles of the swift spring melt, Uncle Jack intercepted him. Lincoln Noah, he said, I've been looking for you. Come on home with me and meet your lovely Aunt Lottie, my wife. Lincoln glanced toward the community center, then turned somewhat reluctantly and caught stride with Uncle Jack. After all, this was what he had come to Barrow to do. In the bright light of 4 a.m., when the feasting was done, when the drums had stopped beating and the dancers' feet were still, when Lincoln and Uncle Jack had righted their misunderstanding and Lincoln had met and laughed with Aunt Lottie, he crawled into a bed in Uncle Jack's apartment and took the ivory bone from his pocket. He rubbed it. It was real. He could see it and feel it. But it was also unreal as Little Owl going off in the Umiak when the helicopter had offered so much, as unreal as his not finding her again, as the wail that had come to him, as the ice he had fought and the wind and sun and current he had dwelled with. Here in this modern apartment, so much like those at home, he knew he would never understand the beautiful people of the ice. But why, he asked himself, why? He sat straight up in bed, knowing at last what Little Owl had said to him as she made her choice. He had heard it every day in the silent language of the whalers, and it put a darkness between them. And the phrase was, it is a real hardship when we have nothing to give. I guess the real hardship, I'm not sure. You have to tell me what you guys think about that ending. That was a little bit confusing to me. But overall, I loved the book. Loved the book. So that was the last chapter, chapter 13.